Hello everyone. In the previous class we talked about Bitcoin and peer-to-peer networks, and the idea was that peer-to-peer networks don't have a central point of failure, and so that would sort of make Bitcoin robust to any sort of central interference of any kind. So today we'll talk about another aspect of Bitcoin and how it uses hash functions. So recall that we had said that in Bitcoin you have blocks, and within every block you have the hash value of the previous block. So suppose this is B0, block B0. So this is hash of B0 is stored here. This would be hash of B1 and so on, where B1 is the next block. And we said these hash values are sort of like a lock, have some sort of a locking mechanism, in that if you try to change any bit in B1, then it's very easily recognizable that the hash of that new block will not match with the hash stored in the next block. So this hash value sort of acts as a unique ID. We should not in theory be able to find any other bit string which matches with this hash value stored over here. If we were able to do so, then we could replace this block B1 with that particular bit string, and we do not want that to be allowed. So how exactly do we do this? And let's first begin with what are some properties of a hash function. So first of all, what we want is that effectively it looks something like this. You have a hash function and you have an input and you have an output. So first property is that the input bit string can be of any size. Okay, so you can pretty much have any bit string of any length. It could be 10 bits, it could be 100 bits, million bits, it doesn't matter. Right? Second, we want this hash function to have a output of fixed size. So let's say some n bits. Okay, so input can have any number of bits, but the output has to have some fixed n bits. Okay, and n can be decided, depending on the application or whatever, and a particular hash function will have a particular size for n. Right? So, for example, in Bitcoin we use something called SHA-256. And this 256 corresponds to n. So the output is of size 256 bits. And a third property we want is that the hash output should be easily computed from the input. So output is efficiently computed. From the input. So let's say that if the input had m bits, okay, so computing the output, we would want it to be of order of n. Okay, so m can be of any size, n is fixed, and to calculate the output it should take time order of n. Okay, so this is some of the basic properties of the hash function. And what we are after is something called a cryptographic hash function. And before we go to cryptographic hash functions, I wanted to talk about something called a random oracle. So random oracle is sort of a theoretical idealized cryptographic hash function. So no real world hash function is actually a random oracle, but theoreticians sort of use a random oracle model for a hash function while analyzing protocols. So let's see what is this random oracle. So random oracle has a table of inputs and outputs. So let me just write that here. Let's say this is the random oracle. So suppose somebody gives it an input. Let's say some x1 is the input, some bit string. So what the random oracle does, it first checks whether x1 is in the table. So whether it is there in the input, and it's not there in this case. Let's say that the table is empty. So what it does is that it generates, let's say it generates a random number in the output space. So I should say uniform random number in output space. So let's say that we are dealing with an n-bit output. So essentially what we are doing is we are throwing a random number, let's say some sort of a dice, which lands uniformly in the n-bit space. Okay, so it's a random number between 0 and 2 to the power of n minus 1. Okay, so in this space 0 up to 2 to the power of n minus 1. And let's say we get a particular output y1, which is the random number, and we put both of these in the table. Okay, so you've taken any input given by somebody. First you check in the table if it's there. If it's not there, you generate a random number and you put that random number in the output of the table. Okay. Now let's say somebody gives us input some x2. So again we repeat the procedure. We find that x2 is not in the table, and we find another random number y2. So we put x2 and y2 in the table. So these are the outputs of the random oracle. Okay. So let's say somebody gave x1 to the random oracle, it generated y1. So it will return the output to the person who's giving it as input. So in the first case it would have returned y1, in the second case it would have returned y2. Okay. And similarly, let's say that many other inputs came and this table got filled with x3, y3, whatever, x4, y4 and so on. Now let's say somebody came along and let's say he gave x1 as the input again. So now the random oracle looks up the table as usual and it finds that x1 is indeed in the table, and now it returns y1. Okay, so this is how a random oracle works, and while analyzing cryptographic protocols, researchers typically assume that the hash function used is well modeled by a random oracle. Okay, so the random oracle is able to generate random numbers, and if the input has not been seen before, it generates a random number and returns that and stores it in its table. But if the input has been seen before, as we saw in this last case, x1 was seen before, it returns y1, which was stored earlier. Okay. So what are the properties of this? So first of all, every particular input, if the same input is sent again and again, the random oracle returns the same output. Okay. For the same x1, you get the same output. But at the same time, different inputs have pretty much random outputs. So x1 may be differing from x2, let's say in 1 bit, but y1 and y2 have no relationship at all, they are generated randomly. Okay, so this is sort of what we want of a hash function. So in practice, of course, hash functions don't generate random numbers, right? Hash functions are deterministic functions, which is why it's non-trivial to build a real hash function which has properties similar to the random oracle. So let's talk about cryptographic hash functions. So these of course have the same properties which we studied earlier of basic hash functions, input size of any length, output fixed size, and efficient computation. But it usually has additional properties. We want these additional properties. And for this particular discussion, I am going to refer you to the textbook by Arvind Narayanan. Okay, so I'll upload a version of this textbook, the free version. I'll upload it to Moodle so that everybody has access to it. But the terms that I use will be very similar to what he uses in his textbook. So first of all, what we want from the hash function is collision resistance. So what is collision resistant? A hash function is collision resistance. Let me write that out. A hash function h is collision resistant if it is infeasible, if it is computationally infeasible, to find two inputs let's say x1 and x2, and of course x1 is not equal to x2. Such that the outputs are the same. So this is something like the unique ID property. We don't want to be able to find two inputs whose output is the same. And if you think about it, so why do I use this term computationally infeasible? Why don't I just say that there cannot be two collisions at all? Okay, so that's theoretically impossible if you think about it. So you have the hash function and the output space is of size 2 to the power of n. And what is the input space? The input space is essentially infinite in size, because I can have any bit string, right, of any length. Right? So there are infinite number of inputs and a finite number of outputs over here of size 2 to the power of n. So obviously there have to be collisions in theory, right? So you can't have a unique ID for every different input. Right? It's theoretically impossible. There have to be collisions. That's why I'm saying computationally infeasible, which means that given the computation you have today in the world, there is, let's say, certain 2 to the power of, let's say, or very large number of calculations per second, or hash computations possible per second, right? Trillions and trillions, extremely large number. So suppose somebody had all that computational power at his hand, all the computers in his hand. It should take him, let's say, trillions of years to be able to find two collisions. It should take him that long, and that's what I mean by computationally infeasible. Okay? So there is no guarantee in the real world with hash functions that you will not have collisions. In fact, many hash functions, for example, there was MD5, I think. Right? MD5 was a hash function used for a long time, but people discovered collisions, okay, because the hash function was not that good. So with something like SHA-256, it's much harder, or people think so, right? And it would, in theory, if it is a well-defined hash function, it might take trillions of years to get a collision. So let's think for a moment, how long does it take? Suppose let's do an analysis for a random oracle. So for a random oracle, how long would it take to get a collision? Okay. So this is your idealized hash function, not a real hash function. And you feed in inputs and you get outputs. So how many such inputs would you have to feed in order to get the same output? So remember that the random oracle is actually generating a random number for every new input that it has not seen before. So essentially the question is, if we are flipping a coin and we are generating something in the range of 0, 1 up to 2 to the power of n minus 1, how many times should we try so that we get a collision? And essentially this is got to do with the birthday paradox, which many of you have already studied. So what is the birthday paradox? It says that if you have let's say m people in a room, what is the probability that 2 of them will have the same birthday? Right? So now of course the space is not 2 to the power of n minus 1, it's 365. We have 365 days. Okay, we are excluding leap years and so on, but how large does m have to be so that there's a reasonable chance that you'll find 2 people in the room with the same birthday? Okay. And effectively the probability becomes roughly half. Probability that 2 people have same birthday becomes non-negligible. I'm just not being too precise here. When roughly m is equal to 20, I think it's 23, right? So if you have 23 or more people in the room, then it's with very high chance you'll have 2 people with the same birthday. Okay? And mathematically, what does that mean? So how many inputs would I have to try? I would have to try order of let me see, order of square root of n inputs in this hash function to get a collision. Okay, so this can be mathematically proved, and many of you have seen it in your earlier classes, right? So order of root n, I beg your pardon, it's order of root 2 to the power of n, which is the size of the output. Okay, so you keep trying a number of times. You don't have to try 2 to the power of n times. Okay, then you're pretty much sure with very high probability you will get a collision. But even if it is of the order of square root of that, you have a reasonable chance of getting a collision. So for something like SHA 256, so SHA 256 has an output of 256 bits. So you would have to try order of root of 2 to the power of 256 times, but that's still pretty large. It's 2 to the power of 128. So that's a extremely large number of trials you would have to conduct in order to find a collision. Right? So that's if you have a 256-bit random oracle. So there's still a question mark about real hash function like SHA and so on, because they don't really generate random numbers like the random oracle. They are purely deterministic functions. and maybe somebody will in the future be able to find collisions for the SHA function quite easily. You never know, right? And then Bitcoin would be in trouble, right? So cryptography, of course, assumes that certain constructions are well done. So like the SHA-256, people believe that nobody will ever find a collision given the computational power we have today. But you can never be sure, because there's a gap between the random oracle and real hash function. Okay, random oracles actually generate a random number in the space, whereas real hash functions are deterministic functions. Okay, they don't generate random numbers. So this is about collision resistance, and we exploit this collision resistant property when we require unique IDs, either for blocks or even for transactions, as we'll see later. So a second property is hiding. So what is the meaning of hiding? A hash function is hiding essentially when if there's something in the input which you don't know, then it is, and you sort of know the output, then it would be infeasible to find the input. Okay, so let me just write that out formally. A hash function H is hiding when a secret value R is chosen so this R is chosen, let's say, from a probability distribution. Which has high minimum entropy. So high minimum entropy means that the function is, the random variable is very random. We'll see the exact definition of what it means, but it should be hard to guess what that random number is. So it has high minimum entropy. Then given the hash of this random number concatenated with some x, so this stands for concatenation. So it means you just put the bit string R and you just put x after it and send that total input through the hash function. So concatenation means just putting them together. Then given this, it is infeasible to find x. So what is this saying? This is saying that I want to hide x. So let's say that x is something important. Maybe it's the value that I may be wanting to pay for something, right? But I want to keep it secret. Let's say it's an auction going on and somebody wants to bid the value x, but he wants to keep that value secret, right? So he just doesn't want to send that through the hash function and give the output, okay? Because if somebody sees h of x, the question is, can they guess x? You might want to think about it. Can I go this way backwards? So an auction, how much can somebody bid, right? Maybe it's of the order of few thousands or a few millions, that few $1 million. That's sort of the range in which X would be. So somebody could easily compute the hash values of all those million values, right? So let's say X is within 0 and let's say 2 to the power of 20, right? It's known that auction bids have to be, let's say, within that range. Somebody can easily calculate the hash value of all these inputs, and then if you give him this hash value, anybody can easily say what X is, right? So it's trivial to find out what X is given h of X in this particular example, just because the range of X is very limited. Okay, somebody just pre-computes the hash values of all those possible inputs. So just sending X through the hash function doesn't hide the value of X. Okay, suppose you tell somebody h of X, that doesn't hide it. So what you do instead is you generate a random number from a large space. Let's say I say uniform in 0 and 2 to the power of 256. Okay, that's a pretty large space. I put that random number and concatenate it with X, and now I feed that as an input to the hash function. So I get output as R concatenated with X. Okay. Now this value is this is sort of a unique ID for my input in some sense, because it's theoretically impossible to get collisions, right? We said for anybody given all the computation in the world. So suppose I say that this is my bid. Okay, this is a hash of my bid. Okay. Now can somebody guess X? That's what we are asking. Can somebody guess X given this? Okay. So now the space of this R concatenated with X is extremely large. It's 256 bits plus 20 bits. Okay, so that's extremely large. So for somebody to guess what X is would be pretty much impossible, right? Because he can't really compute all the inputs in that particular space. Okay, so suppose, of course, the hash function was well designed and it had properties something like the random oracle. It would be near impossible to guess R concatenated with X from this. So this is sometimes called the one-way property of the hash function. Okay, that it's easy to go from the input to output, but it's near impossible to go from the output to the input. Okay, so somebody who's doing an auction bid, let's say, is doing it on the blockchain, like in the live session we discussed about auctions. So in that particular case, he could bid a particular value X, he could put a random number in the front, and he could put this hash value on the blockchain. Okay? And nobody knows what he has bid. Right? But later on, suppose he has to reveal what the bid was. How does he do that? Well, he just presents this. So you present the input. This is the input to reveal what it was. Okay. So what the person does is initially he wants to hide it. Let's say that's the rules of the auction. They are allowed to hide the bid that they made. So he puts a random number in the front, calculates the hash value, and he commits this. So everybody is aware of this commitment so that he can't cheat later on. And then later on, let's say that all the people bid, they've all put commitments. Then they are forced to reveal what they had bid. Okay. So he reveals R concatenated with X, right? And anybody can check that this is indeed the correct input for this, because they can calculate the hash value of this. Okay. That's easy to compute. And they know that the first 256 bits is a random number, right? So they can just remove the first 256 bits and they are left with his actual auction bid, which is X. Okay. So this is how you would use something like the hiding property in a blockchain. So what I haven't told you so far is what this minimum entropy means. Okay, so what is minimum entropy mean? So suppose R takes let's say n possible values, and each of these is chosen with a particular probability. So now I want this to be a very random function, essentially something like a uniform distribution where all these probabilities are more or less equal. Okay, so how to capture that is I come up with this thing called the minimum entropy, and the minimum entropy is given by minimum of I belonging to 1, 2 and so on up to n of minus log to the base 2 probability of P of Ri. Okay, so probability of random number is of course less than 1, so minus of the log of that probability is going to give you a positive number, right? And I'm looking for the smallest of those. So effectively okay, so what is this minimum entropy going to give? So essentially this is going to find the largest P of R you find the largest of these probabilities and calculate minus log 2 of that particular probability, and that gives you the minimum entropy. So let's look at two distributions. So one is, let's say, uniform, and let's say one is non-uniform. Okay, so of course this is much, in this case this is much larger than over this. Let's say that you have the same number R1 to Rn over here, right? So we pick out the largest one among them. So here of course it's any one of them, they all have the same probability, and if you calculate the minimum entropy you will find that the minimum entropy here is higher. So minimum entropy is high here compared to the other case. So it's just a formal way for information theory people to say what it means for a distribution to be very random. Okay? So you don't want it to be easy for somebody to guess the value of R. In this sort of a situation, because certain values of R are more probable than other values, somebody might guess that the actual value corresponds to this value, which has a very high probability, and he may be right. Whereas here it would be very hard in the first probability distribution to guess what R is. Okay, so this is what minimum entropy means. So let's talk about a third property that we want, and this is called puzzle friendliness. And this is a property used a lot in the consensus protocol, which is called proof of work. So let me write down the definition. So H is puzzle friendly. So hash function H if for every n bit output value let's say y of the hash function if k is chosen from a distribution with high minimum entropy, so k is, you can think of it as being essentially from a uniform random distribution, then it is infeasible to find some x such that h of k concatenated with x is equal to y, and this is it's infeasible to find it in time significantly less than uh, 2 to the power of n. Okay. So what does this mean? So it means that suppose I give you y, I tell you that I want you to find an input which corresponds to this y, and I tell you that there are some constraints on the input. The constraint is that part of the input is a random number, and I tell you, okay, this is fixed. I generate a random number and I equal to k, and I tell you this is given to you. You have to concatenate to it x. You have to add some bit string x to it. X, could be of any size, and you have to find x such that the hash output of k concatenated with x is equal to y. So how would you do this? So I am giving you this y of some value, I generate a random number k, and you have to find out x in order that hash of k concatenated with x is y. So this is the puzzle that I am giving you. Okay, so given y and k, find x. And the hash function is puzzle friendly if you have to you have to do computation of the order of 2 to the power of n. Okay, definitely not much smaller than that. So how would you do this in practice? If the hash function is something like a random oracle, what you would do is you would try a particular value of x, okay, check its output, see if it's equal to y, okay, and probably it's not going to be, right, because it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. Okay, so you try x1, it doesn't work, you try x2 and so on, right? So you have to try this a large number of times, and if the hash function is well designed and it's puzzle friendly, then n should be of the order of 2 to the power of n. Okay, so you keep trying this really number of times till you actually solve the puzzle, till you actually get a value of x such that y is equal to h of k concatenated with x. Okay. So how is this related exactly with Bitcoin? And like I hinted just now, that's really the heart of what is called proof of work. So proof of work is essentially solving a particular puzzle in order to generate blocks. Okay, so here's what the puzzle is. So let me explain what proof of work is. So you have a block, and this is the previous block. So let's say this is bk and this is block bk plus 1. So this is nothing but hash of the previous block, right? That's what we've seen till now. Okay. Now within this block there is a 256-bit number here, and we call this the nonce. The nonce value, it can take any value, there is no restriction on it, right? So whoever is creating the block has the choice to put in any number here. Okay. So what is the puzzle? So the person who's creating the block has to find a nonce such that hash of bk plus 1 is less than some threshold, let's say t. Okay. So this is the pointer to the previous block. So how does he do this? So for the block to be a valid block in Bitcoin, the hash of the block should be less than some threshold t, and t is defined by the protocol. We'll see later on in the course how t is defined. So the value is defined by protocol rules, by the Bitcoin rules, you can say. Okay. So everybody knows what T is, and let's say that they have all received this previous block P. Now they have to figure out what is going to be the next block. And remember that in Bitcoin there is no leader of any kind. There is nobody who controls it. It's totally distributed, totally leaderless. So how do they agree to what is going to be the next block? That was thought to be impossible. And what Satoshi said is really this something very simple, what's called proof of work. And really this is it. This is Satoshi's brilliant idea of proof of work in a nutshell. He said that whoever is the first person to generate a block like this, whose hash value is less than the threshold, where the threshold is defined by the protocol or the Bitcoin rules, that person is the one who generates the next block. Okay, how does it work? So let's say everybody's got this previous block. He calculates the hash value, puts it in the potential next block. Right, so this is the potential next block. And then what he does is, in this nonce field, he keeps trying out different values. So one algorithm would be, of course, he puts in 0, then 1 and 2 and so on. He keeps changing the value and keeps calculating the output. Okay, so this is his block. Let's say this is hash of bk and this is the nonce. And then he essentially tries different nonce values till hash of this new block is less than the threshold. So this threshold is chosen to be much smaller than 2 to the power of 256. Okay. So it's not easy to find this hash value. So people try millions, trillions of different nonce values until somebody finds a nonce value such that the hash value is less than the threshold. And because we assume that this hash function is well designed, it has the puzzle friendly property. So somebody would have had to try, totally in the network you would expect people to try 2 to the power of 256 divided by the threshold number of times in order to succeed in this puzzle. Okay, so since t is much smaller than 2 to the power of 256, people would have had to try a huge number of times, maybe trillions and trillions and trillions of times, in order to actually find a valid block. Okay. So what happens is that somebody finds a block and then he ships it out, and what everybody else does, they check that the hash value of his block is indeed less than the threshold, and if it is, and of course it satisfies other rules of Bitcoin, that is decided by everybody to be the next block. Okay. And then the game continues again. Okay, so once somebody generates a valid block which has threshold, hash of the block should be less than the threshold, people assume that this block is the true one, this is the next one in the blockchain, and then the game continues for the next block. But now instead of h of bk, we put h of bk plus 1, and now people have to find a new nonce for the next block. Okay, so this is proof of work in a nutshell, and we look at the details again later on.